Welcome to the edge of an ancient world. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself floating above the clearest blue water you've ever seen. Below you stretches the largest living structure on Earth, so vast that astronauts can see it from space without any instruments at all. This is the Great Barrier Reef, and tonight, we're going to explore its secrets together. Our story begins not in years, but in millennia. The reef you could visit today is actually quite young in geological terms, a mere 6,000 to 8,000 years old. But this isn't the reef's first life. Beneath the vibrant corals that paint the ocean floor in endless color, there are the bones of older reefs, some dating back over 20 million years. The Great Barrier Reef has lived many lives, rising and falling with the seas, dying back during ice ages when ocean levels dropped, then blooming again when the waters returned. Stretching along the northeast coast of Australia for over 2,300 kilometers, that's about 1,400 miles, the reef is larger than the Great Wall of China, and far more alive. It's not a single reef at all, but a collection of nearly 3,000 individual reef systems and hundreds of tropical islands, all woven together into one magnificent ecosystem. But what exactly is a coral reef? Here's where our story becomes almost magical. The reef isn't made of rock or stone, though it feels solid beneath the diver's fins. It's built by some of the tiniest architects in the ocean, coral polyps. These creatures are no bigger than a few millimeters, yet generation after generation, they've constructed cathedrals of calcium carbonate, their skeletons stacking upon those of their ancestors, building upward toward the sunlight over thousands of years. Each coral polyp is a soft-bodied animal, related to jellyfish and sea anemones, living inside a protective limestone skeleton it creates itself. During the day, they rest. But at night, the reef transforms. The polyps extend their tiny tentacles, waving them through the dark water to catch even tinier zooplankton drifting by on the currents. Millions upon millions of these delicate creatures, feeding in perfect synchrony. Yet here's the secret that makes the Great Barrier Reef truly extraordinary: the corals aren't alone. Living within the tissue of each polyp are microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. These tiny plant-like organisms perform photosynthesis, converting sunlight into energy, and they share up to 90% of the nutrients they produce with their coral hosts. In return, the coral provides them with a safe home and access to sunlight. This partnership, this symbiosis, is what allows coral reefs to thrive in waters that would otherwise be too nutrient-poor to support such abundant life. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, established in 1975 to protect this wonder, covers an area of approximately 344,400 square kilometers, roughly the size of Italy, or slightly larger than the entire state of New Mexico. Managing such an enormous area requires careful planning. The park is divided into different zones, each with its own rules about what activities are permitted, ensuring that this natural treasure can be enjoyed while still being preserved. Within this vast expanse live over 1,500 species of fish. Imagine that for a moment, 1,500 different kinds of fish, from the tiniest gobies hiding in coral crevices to the massive whale sharks that cruise through the deeper waters. There are fish that change color, fish that change gender, fish that farm algae, and fish that clean the teeth of larger predators. Each species playing its part in the reef's grand symphony. And with that gentle thought of this underwater city teeming with life, each creature in its place, each one connected to the next, we continue deeper into the reef's story. As we drift deeper into the reef's story, let's turn our attention to the coral themselves, the master builders of this underwater metropolis. There are over 400 species of coral on the Great Barrier Reef, each with its own distinctive shape and character. Some grow like tables, creating vast platforms that shade the creatures below. Others branch like antlers, their delicate fingers reaching toward the surface. Still others form massive boulder-like structures called brain corals, their surfaces carved with grooves that truly do resemble the folds of a human brain. These corals grow slowly, patiently. Most species add just 1 to 2 centimeters to their structure each year. The largest formations you might see while diving, those enormous coral heads rising like monuments from the ocean floor, could be several hundred years old. They've been growing there since before ships first charted these waters, silent witnesses to centuries of change. But the reef's story isn't just one of patience and slow growth. Once a year, something miraculous happens. On a single night, usually in late spring following a full moon, the corals spawn. Billions upon billions of eggs and sperm are released into the water simultaneously, creating what looks like an underwater snowstorm in reverse. Instead of falling, everything rises. The timing must be perfect, coordinated across hundreds of kilometers of reef. Scientists believe the corals use cues from water temperature, day length, and the lunar cycle to synchronize this mass spawning event. It's one of nature's most spectacular displays, though few humans are ever there to witness it in the darkness. The Great Barrier Reef isn't just home to fish and coral. 6 of the world's 7 species of marine turtle nest on the reef's islands and beaches. The green sea turtle, the loggerhead, the hawksbill, the flatback, the olive ridley, and the enormous leatherback, the largest turtle of all, which can weigh up to 900 kilograms. These ancient mariners have been swimming the world's oceans for over 100 million years. They survived whatever killed the dinosaurs, and now they return to the same beaches where they were born, sometimes traveling thousands of kilometers to lay their eggs in the warm sand. Picture a female green turtle, hundreds of pounds of grace underwater but laboring heavily on land, digging her nest in the sand under the cover of night. She'll lay around 100 eggs, each one soft and spherical, about the size of a ping-pong ball. Then she'll cover them carefully, disguising the nest before returning to the sea. 2 months later, if the eggs survive, the hatchlings will emerge together and race toward the moonlit water, beginning their own journey into the vast ocean. Swimming through these same waters are approximately 30 species of whales and dolphins. The humpback whales are perhaps the most famous visitors. Each year, between June and November, these magnificent creatures migrate from their feeding grounds in Antarctica to the warm waters of the Great Barrier Reef to breed and give birth. A mother humpback and her calf might spend weeks in the sheltered waters, the baby nursing and gaining strength before the long journey south. Adult humpbacks can reach lengths of up to 16 meters and weigh around 40 tons. Despite their enormous size, they're capable of breaching, launching their entire body out of the water, in displays that leave observers breathless. The reef is also home to more than 1,500 species of sponges, though these humble creatures rarely capture the imagination the way colorful fish or graceful turtles do. Yet sponges are among the most ancient animals on Earth, and they play a crucial role in the reef ecosystem. They filter vast quantities of water, removing bacteria and organic particles. A single sponge can filter thousands of liters of seawater each day. They also provide shelter for countless small creatures, shrimps, crabs, and juvenile fish, within their porous bodies. Then there are the mollusks, over 5,000 species of them. Giant clams, some with shells over a meter wide, rest on the reef with their colorful mantles exposed to the sun. Like the corals, they host symbiotic algae that provide them with nutrients through photosynthesis. These clams can live for over 100 years, slowly growing in their chosen spot, never moving once they've settled. Cowries with shells polished to a porcelain shine creep across the coral at night. Octopuses, among the most intelligent invertebrates on Earth, hunt in the crevices, changing color and texture to match their surroundings so perfectly they seem to vanish before your eyes. And threading through it all, providing the very foundation of the food web, are the phytoplankton, microscopic plants that drift in the sunlit surface waters, turning light into life through photosynthesis. Though invisible to us, these tiny organisms are consumed by zooplankton, which in turn feeds small fish, which feed larger fish, which feed sharks and dolphins and seabirds. Everything is connected, each life supporting others in an intricate web that has taken thousands of years to weave. As you imagine this complexity, this beautiful interconnection of lives large and small, let yourself drift with the current, peaceful and calm, as we continue our journey through the reef. Let the rhythm of the waves carry you now, as we explore the hunters and the hunted of the reef. In these waters swim more than 130 species of sharks and rays, creatures that have prowled the oceans for over 400 million years, long before trees grew on land, before flowers bloomed, before birds took flight. The reef sharks, white tip, black tip, and gray reef sharks, patrol the coral formations with ancient efficiency. Despite their fearsome reputation, most are quite small, rarely exceeding 2 meters in length, and they're far more interested in fish than in people. They hunt primarily at dawn and dusk, using electroreceptors in their snouts to detect the tiny electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of hidden prey. A fish buried in sand, thinking itself safe, is still visible to a shark's remarkable senses. Gliding across the sandy flats between reefs, you might encounter rays of extraordinary beauty. Manta rays, with wingspans reaching up to 5 meters, move through the water like enormous underwater birds, their mouths open wide to filter plankton from the current. Despite their size, they're completely harmless, gentle giants that sometimes approach diverse with what seems like curiosity. Then there are the stingrays, resting camouflaged on the bottom, and the spotted eagle rays that swim in graceful schools, their white spotted backs resembling a starry night sky. The Great Barrier Reef supports an abundance of seabirds as well. More than 215 species have been recorded visiting or nesting on the reef's islands. Terns dive from the air to snatch fish from the surface. Frigatebirds, with their distinctive forked tails and 7-foot wingspans, soar on thermals, sometimes harassing other birds to steal their catch. The islands serve as crucial breeding grounds, some hosting colonies of thousands of birds. During nesting season, these remote cays become nurseries, filled with the calls of chicks waiting to be fed by parents that range far across the ocean searching for food. But let's descend now, down through the water column, past the sunlit shallows where most of the coral grows, deeper into the blue. The Great Barrier Reef isn't just a surface phenomenon. The continental shelf on which it sits drops away to depths of over 2,000 meters in some places. While coral needs sunlight and can only grow in relatively shallow water, typically less than 50 meters deep where light still penetrates, the deeper waters of the reef system support their own communities of life. In these deeper zones live creatures adapted to dimmer light and greater pressure. Here you'll find gardens of sea whips and sea fans, soft corals that sway in the current like plants in a breeze, though they too are animals. Deep-dwelling fish with large eyes to capture what little light filters down from above. Nautiluses, living fossils with beautiful spiral shells, rising from the depths at night to hunt. Each layer of the reef, from surface to seafloor, hosts its own particular community. The reef system also encompasses extensive seagrass beds, often overlooked but absolutely vital to the ecosystem. These underwater meadows, covering thousands of square kilometers, are nurseries for juvenile fish and feeding grounds for green sea turtles and the dugong. The dugong, often called a sea cow, is a gentle marine mammal found only in the Indo-Pacific region. The Great Barrier Reef supports one of the largest dugong populations in the world, with thousands of these creatures grazing on seagrass like underwater manatees. They can grow to 3 meters long and weigh up to 400 kilograms. A single dugong may consume up to 40 kilograms of seagrass each day, using their bristled snouts to uproot entire plants. Stretching between the reefs, there are also vast expanses of soft-bottom habitat, sandy and muddy areas that might seem barren at first glance but are actually home to specialized communities. Garden eels sway in their burrows, their long bodies anchored in the sand as they pluck plankton from the current. Flatfish lie perfectly camouflaged, matching the color and texture of the seafloor. Mantis shrimp, with their complex eyes that can see colors beyond human perception and their club-like appendages that strike with the force of a bullet, hunt from their burrows. The Great Barrier Reef was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1981, recognized as one of the most significant natural sites on Earth. The criteria for this designation acknowledge the reef's outstanding natural beauty, its importance to biodiversity, and its role as a habitat for threatened species. It was one of the first places to receive this honor, joining a select list that includes Earth's most precious natural and cultural treasures. Indigenous Australian peoples, particularly the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, have had connections to the reef stretching back at least 60,000 years, far longer than the current reef has existed. They witnessed the older reefs, hunted and fished these waters through ice ages and warming periods, and their oral traditions contain knowledge of the reef passed down through countless generations. Their connection to these waters is spiritual and practical, woven into stories, songs, and traditional practices that have endured for millennia. As you contemplate this deep history, these ancient connections between people and place, between predator and prey, between the surface and the depths, let yourself float in that timeless space where the reef has always existed, where the water is clear and blue, and where life continues its eternal dance. Breathe slowly now, and let us turn our attention to some of the reef's most captivating residents, the creatures of color and pattern that make this underwater world so enchanting. Among the most iconic are the clownfish, made famous to the world but living their quiet lives in the reef long before any story was told about them. These small, orange fish with their distinctive white bands live in a remarkable partnership with sea anemones. The anemone's tentacles are covered with stinging cells that paralyze most fish on contact, yet the clownfish swims among them safely, protected by a special mucus coating on its skin. In exchange for this shelter, the clownfish cleans the anemone, removing parasites and dead tissue, and even brings food to its host. The clownfish rarely ventures more than a few meters from its anemone home. And here's something remarkable: all clownfish are born male, but the largest, most dominant fish in each anemone becomes female. If that female dies, the largest male will transform, changing sex to take her place, a fluid approach to reproduction that ensures the group's survival. Swimming through the coral gardens, you'll encounter parrotfish, named for their bright colors and beak-like teeth. These teeth are actually fused together to form a powerful tool for scraping algae from coral and rock. As they feed, parrotfish bite off chunks of coral skeleton along with the algae, grind it up with specialized teeth in their throats, and excrete the indigestible calcium carbonate as fine sand. A single large parrotfish can produce hundreds of kilograms of sand each year. Those beautiful white sand beaches fringing reef islands? Much of that sand has passed through a parrotfish. They're literally reshaping the reef, one bite at a time. The Great Barrier Reef is also home to some of the ocean's most venomous creatures. The blue-ringed octopus, barely larger than a golf ball, carries enough venom to kill 26 adult humans, though it's shy and will only bite if threatened. When agitated, vibrant blue rings pulse across its body, a warning display of extraordinary beauty and danger combined. Then there's the box jellyfish, with its nearly transparent bell and trailing tentacles armed with millions of stinging cells. Despite their potentially lethal venom, these creatures aren't aggressive, they're simply drifting filter feeders, part of the reef's complex web of life. Lurking on the seafloor, perfectly camouflaged among rocks and coral rubble, the stonefish holds the title of the world's most venomous fish. Its dorsal spines contain toxin that causes excruciating pain, but the fish itself is sedentary and docile, relying entirely on camouflage to catch prey and avoid being stepped on. It can wait motionless for days, looking exactly like an algae-covered stone, until a small fish or shrimp wanders close enough to be inhaled in a lightning-fast strike. The waters of the Great Barrier Reef maintain a relatively stable temperature, ranging from about 24 degrees Celsius in winter to 29 degrees in summer. This warmth is essential for coral growth. Reef-building corals cannot survive in waters below about 18 degrees Celsius. The reef exists in this perfect zone, where the water is warm enough for corals to thrive but not so warm that they become stressed. This delicate temperature balance is one reason the reef is positioned precisely where it is, in the tropical waters off northeastern Australia. Beneath the surface, the reef creates its own weather systems of sorts. The massive structure of the reef affects how currents flow, creating areas of upwelling where nutrient-rich water from the depths rises to the surface, and other areas of calm where larvae can settle. These current patterns are like invisible highways, carrying nutrients, plankton, and the offspring of countless species from one part of the reef to another. A coral larva might drift for days or weeks before finding the right spot to settle and begin its own colony. The reef system includes more than 900 islands, ranging from tiny sand cays barely above the water's surface to substantial continental islands with their own forests and freshwater streams. Some islands are vegetated with dense tropical growth, coconut palms, she oaks, and pandanus trees that provide nesting sites for seabirds and shade for the beaches below. Others are nothing more than shifting sand banks that appear and disappear with the tides and seasons, temporary resting spots for migrating birds. Living among the coral branches are tiny, colorful fish called damselfish, fiercely territorial despite their small size. A damselfish will aggressively defend its small patch of reef, sometimes just a few square meters, from fish many times its size. They farm algae within their territories, maintaining small gardens by removing unwanted algae species and protecting their crop from other herbivores. It's a sophisticated behavior, this underwater agriculture, passed down through generations of fish no longer than your finger. the nighttime reef is an entirely different world from the daytime reef. As the sun sets and darkness falls, a shift change occurs. The daytime fish retreat into crevices and hiding spots. Some parrotfish even secrete a mucus cocoon around themselves, a sleeping bag that masks their scent from predators. Meanwhile, nocturnal creatures emerge. Octopuses unfold from their dens, changing color as they hunt. Moray eels slide out from their holes, their sense of smell leading them to prey. Crustaceans click and scuttle across the coral. And the corals themselves extend their polyps to feed, transforming the reef into a garden of waving tentacles. Let yourself imagine that transformation now, from day to night, from bright colors to bioluminescent glows, from one community of life to another, as the endless cycle continues, as it has for thousands of years. As dawn breaks once more over the reef, let us explore the intricate relationships that bind this ecosystem together, partnerships and dependencies that reveal just how interconnected life truly is beneath these waves. We've already met the clownfish and their anemones, but theirs is just one of countless such arrangements. Consider the cleaner wrasse, a small fish with a crucial role to play. These fish establish cleaning stations at specific spots on the reef, and larger fish, even predators, will visit these stations and wait patiently to be cleaned. The cleaner wrasse picks parasites, dead skin, and bits of food from the teeth, gills, and scales of its clients. Even sharks and groupers, capable of swallowing the tiny cleaner in a single gulp, remain perfectly still during their cleaning. Moths agape. Some fish have been observed visiting cleaning stations multiple times a day. The relationship benefits both. The cleaner wrasse gets an easy meal, while the larger fish maintain their health. Scientists have found that when cleaner wrasse are removed from a section of reef, the health of the fish community declines measurably. The reef is also home to creatures that practice forms of cooperation that seem almost improbable. The pistol shrimp and goby fish share a burrow in the sand. The shrimp, nearly blind, does all the digging and maintains their home with its powerful claws. The goby, with excellent vision, stands guard at the entrance. The shrimp keeps one antenna touching the fish at all times. If the goby detects danger and darts into the burrow, the shrimp feels the movement and follows instantly. Two entirely different species, communicating through touch, sharing a home, each compensating for the other's weakness. The Great Barrier Reef generates significant wave energy. The massive structure breaks ocean swells, protecting the coastline behind it from erosion. Without the reef, coastal communities would face much stronger waves and storm surge. The reef acts as a natural breakwater, dissipating the energy of waves that travel across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. During tropical cyclones, which occasionally strike this region, the reef absorbs tremendous force that would otherwise hammer the mainland coast. In this way, the reef doesn't just support marine life, it protects human communities as well. Economically, the reef contributes billions of dollars to Australia's economy each year, supporting over 64,000 jobs through tourism, fishing, and research. More than 2 million visitors travel to the reef annually, coming from every corner of the globe to witness this natural wonder. They snorkel in the shallows, dive to greater depths, take glass-bottom boat tours, or view the reef from the air. This tourism, carefully managed to minimize impact, helps fund conservation efforts and gives countless people a personal connection to the reef's fate. But the reef provides value that goes beyond economics. Scientists estimate that coral reefs worldwide provide ecosystem services worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually: coastal protection, fisheries, tourism, and potential medical discoveries. Already, compounds derived from reef organisms are being studied for their potential to treat cancer, arthritis, bacterial infections, and viruses. The cone snail, for instance, produces venom containing powerful painkillers more potent than morphine. Who knows what other medical breakthroughs might be waiting in the tissues of creatures we haven't yet fully studied. The reef is also a living laboratory for understanding evolution and adaptation. Within this single ecosystem, you can observe nearly every feeding strategy life has devised: filter feeders like sponges and clams, herbivores like parrotfish and sea urchins, carnivores ranging from tiny coral polyps to tiger sharks, scavengers, parasites, and even farmers like the territorial damselfish. You can see examples of camouflage so perfect that fish and octopuses become invisible, and warning coloration so bright it announces, "I am dangerous, stay away." There are fish that swim in schools for protection, and solitary hunters that rely on stealth. Living within the reef's complexity are approximately 5,000 species of mollusks, and among them are the cephalopods, octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, creatures of remarkable intelligence. The octopus, with its 9 brains, one central brain and a smaller brain in each of its 8 arms, can solve puzzles, use tools, and remember individual humans. Cuttlefish can change not just their color but also the texture of their skin in fractions of a second, creating rippling patterns that mesmerize prey. They communicate through these color changes, flashing signals to rivals and potential mates in a visual language we're only beginning to understand. There are also the Christmas tree worms, which aren't worms at all but polychaetes, segmented marine worms that burrow into coral and extend twin spirals of feeding tentacles that look exactly like miniature Christmas trees. These spiral plumes come in brilliant colors: red, orange, yellow, blue, white, and they retract instantly into their burrows at the slightest shadow or disturbance. They can live for 30 years or more, filtering plankton from the water while remaining anchored in their coral home, never moving from the spot they chose as larvae. Swimming through the water column are jellyfish of extraordinary variety, from tiny, transparent hydrozoans to larger moon jellies with their distinctive 4-leaf clover pattern visible through their translucent bells. Despite having no brain, no heart, and no blood, jellyfish have survived for over 500 million years, predating the reef, predating fish, predating almost everything else that swims. They drift with the currents, trailing tentacles armed with stinging cells, catching whatever small creatures brush against them. Simple, ancient, and perfectly adapted to their environment. Let yourself drift like these jellyfish now, carried by gentle currents, pulsing slowly through clear water, as we continue deeper into the reef's endless story. Settle into the rhythm of the tide now, as we explore the reef's role as a nursery, a cradle of life where countless species begin their journeys. The sheltered lagoons and coral crevices of the Great Barrier Reef provide essential habitat for juvenile fish, offering protection from predators and abundant food for growing bodies. Many species that spend their adult lives in the open ocean return to the reef to spawn, ensuring their offspring have the best possible start in life. The mangrove forests that fringe many of the reef's islands and coastal areas are particularly important nurseries. These trees, with their distinctive prop roots that arch into the water, create a tangled maze where young fish can hide from predators. Mangroves are remarkable plants. They're one of the few trees that can survive with their roots submerged in salt water, filtering the salt through specialized glands in their leaves. The leaf litter that falls from mangroves breaks down into nutrients that feed the entire coastal food web. Scientists have found that many fish species caught on the reef spent their juvenile months in mangrove habitats, making these forests essential to the reef's productivity despite being separate from the coral itself. Another crucial nursery habitat is the seagrass meadows we touched on earlier. These underwater grasslands are deceptively important. They stabilize sediment, preventing sand and mud from smothering nearby corals. They absorb nutrients that might otherwise fuel harmful algae blooms. And they serve as feeding grounds not just for dugongs and sea turtles, but for countless fish species. Juvenile fish graze on the tiny invertebrates that live among the seagrass blades, copepods, amphipods, and other crustaceans too small to see individually but present in their millions. The Great Barrier Reef experiences two main seasons, a wet season from November to May, and a dry season from June to October. During the wet season, heavy rains fall on the mainland, and rivers swell with runoff that carries sediments and nutrients from the land into the ocean. This seasonal pulse of nutrients can trigger blooms of plankton, providing abundant food for filter feeders. However, too much runoff, especially if it carries fertilizers and other pollutants from agriculture, can harm the reef by reducing water clarity and promoting algae growth that competes with coral. Within the reef's biodiversity, there are partnerships so specific they seem almost designed. Take the imperial shrimp, a tiny crustacean barely a centimeter long that lives exclusively on sea cucumbers and certain species of sea slugs. The shrimp rides on its host like a passenger, feeding on the mucus and detritus that accumulates there. Different species of imperial shrimp have evolved to match the colors of their particular hosts: red shrimp on red sea cucumbers, patterned shrimp on patterned slugs. They're born as free-swimming larvae, but, once they find a suitable host, they never leave, spending their entire adult lives on that single creature. The reef is also home to a wealth of echinoderms, the group that includes starfish, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. More than 630 species of echinoderms live on the Great Barrier Reef, from tiny brittle stars that hide in coral crevices to the crown-of-thorns starfish, a large predator that feeds on coral polyps. This starfish, covered in venomous spines, can grow up to 80 centimeters across and has between 7 and 23 arms radiating from its central disc. When crown-of-thorns populations boom, they can cause significant damage to coral, eating their way across reef systems. These population outbreaks appear to be natural events that have occurred for thousands of years, though their frequency may be influenced by nutrient runoff from land. Sea cucumbers, often overlooked as they creep slowly across the seafloor, play a vital role in reef health. They're deposit feeders, consuming sediment and organic matter, digesting what they can use, and excreting the rest. In doing so, they process and clean vast amounts of seafloor material, recycling nutrients and preventing sediment from accumulating on corals. A single sea cucumber can process several kilograms of sediment each day. Some species have an extraordinary defense mechanism. When threatened, they can expel sticky threads or even portions of their internal organs through their anus to entangle or distract predators, then regenerate what they've lost over the following weeks. The biodiversity of the Great Barrier Reef isn't evenly distributed. Certain areas, called biodiversity hotspots, support particularly high concentrations of species. These hotspots often occur where different habitats meet, where reefs transition to seagrass beds, where coral slopes drop into deeper water, or where currents converge bringing nutrients from different directions. These edge zones, these boundaries between habitats, create unique conditions that support specialized communities found nowhere else. Drifting through the water are creatures that seem too delicate to exist: salps, transparent barrel-shaped animals that move by pumping water through their bodies. They're actually tunicates, more closely related to vertebrates than they appear, and they filter phytoplankton with remarkable efficiency. Some salps exist as individuals, while others link together in chains that can stretch for several meters, looking like crystalline necklaces floating through the blue. When they die, their bodies sink rapidly, carrying carbon from the surface waters down to the deep ocean floor, one of the many ways the reef participates in global nutrient and carbon cycles. Among the most beautiful reef inhabitants are the nudibranch, shell-less sea slugs that come in almost every color imaginable. Spanish dancers, large red nudibranch, undulate through the water like flamenco dancers' skirts when disturbed. Smaller species decorate themselves with the stinging cells stolen from the jellyfish they eat, incorporating these weapons into their own tissue for defense. There are nudibranch with frilly gills arranged like flowers on their backs, species with rhinophores like rabbit ears, and some that look like they've been painted by an abstract artist. Each one is a tiny masterpiece, crawling slowly across coral and rock in search of the specific prey they've evolved to eat. Let these images of color and form drift through your mind now: the transparent salps, the jeweled nudibranch, the spiny starfish, each one a variation on the theme of life, each one finding its place in the reef's great tapestry. As we float peacefully through our journey, let us consider the reef's relationship with light, that vital energy from the sun that powers this entire ecosystem. Coral reefs can only flourish in shallow clear water because the symbiotic algae within the coral polyps needs sunlight to photosynthesize. This dependence on light is why the reef grows upward, always reaching toward the sun, filtering down through the water's surface. The clarity of the water around the Great Barrier Reef is itself remarkable. In the outer reefs, visibility can exceed 60 meters on calm days. You could see the length of 2 swimming pools laid end to end through the crystalline water. This clarity exists because the water is relatively low in nutrients. While that might seem counterintuitive, nutrient-rich water tends to be cloudy with plankton and algae. The reef thrives in these clear, nutrient-poor waters precisely because of the symbiotic relationship between coral and zooxanthellae. The corals essentially cultivate their own food source within their tissues, making them independent of the nutrients dissolved in the surrounding water. Light behaves strangely underwater. Red wavelengths are absorbed first, disappearing within the first few meters of depth. Orange goes next, then yellow. By the time you reach 10 meters deep, everything appears in shades of blue and green. This is why many reef fish are brilliantly colored in the shallows but appear dull gray at depth. Their reds and oranges only visible when illuminated by a dive light or when seen near the surface. Some fish have evolved to exploit this, using red coloration as a form of camouflage in deeper water, where red light doesn't penetrate and their colors appear dark and indistinct. The Great Barrier Reef supports at least 14 species of sea snakes, all of which are venomous. In fact, sea snake venom is generally more potent than that of their terrestrial cousins. Yet these serpents are remarkably docile, rarely biting even when handled. They've adapted completely to marine life, with paddle-like tails for swimming and valves that close their nostrils when diving. Some species can remain submerged for over 2 hours, absorbing oxygen through their skin as well as their lungs. They hunt fish and eels in coral crevices, their slender bodies allowing them to follow prey into the narrowest gaps. Beneath the living coral surface lies the reef's foundation, limestone accumulated over millennia. This reef rock is riddled with holes and passages, creating a 3-dimensional maze of hiding places. Some creatures, called cryptofauna, spend their entire lives within this hidden realm, never venturing onto the reef's surface. Scientists who dissolve pieces of reef rock in acid to examine what lives inside have discovered that these cryptic communities can be astonishingly diverse, thousands of tiny worms, crustaceans, and mollusks living in eternal darkness within the reef's porous structure. They feed on bacteria, organic particles, and each other, forming a parallel ecosystem we rarely see. The reef is also home to marine worms of extraordinary variety, more than 500 species of polychaete worms alone. Some build tubes from grains of sand glued together with mucus, extending feathery tentacles to filter food from the water. Others are active predators, hunting through the coral rubble at night. The bobbit worm, which can grow to 3 meters long, buries itself in sediment with only its jaws exposed, waiting to ambush fish that swim too close. Its reflexes are so fast it can snatch a fish in a fraction of a second, dragging it down into the sand before the prey even realizes it's been caught. The fish communities of the reef show fascinating patterns of behavior and social structure. Many species live in harems, where a single dominant male guards and mates with multiple females. If that male dies or disappears, the largest female in the group will change sex and become the new male, a transformation that can take just a few weeks. Wrasses and groupers are among the species that demonstrate this sequential hermaphroditism, their bodies capable of complete sexual transformation when social circumstances demand it. There are also the anglerfish of the reef, not the deep-sea varieties with their bioluminescent lures, but shallow-water frogfish that use a modified spine as a fishing rod, complete with a fleshy lure at the end that resembles a small shrimp or worm. The frogfish sits motionless, perfectly camouflaged against coral or sponge, waving its lure gently until a curious fish comes to investigate. Then, in the fastest strike of any vertebrate, taking as little as 6 milliseconds, the frogfish's mouth expands and it inhales its prey along with surrounding water. The strike is too fast for the human eye to follow. You'd need a high-speed camera to see it happen. Communication on the reef takes many forms. While we think of the underwater world as silent, it's actually quite noisy. Snapping shrimp create loud popping sounds by rapidly closing their claws, generating bubbles that collapse with a crack. Some fish grind their teeth or vibrate their swim bladders to produce sounds. Parrotfish crunch coral audibly. On a healthy reef, the collective noise from thousands of creatures creates a chorus, snaps, pops, grunts, and scrapes, that can be heard from a distance. Scientists have discovered that fish larvae settling from the plankton use this reef noise to navigate, swimming toward the sound of a healthy reef community. The reef also hosts creatures that don't fit neatly into categories, organisms that challenge our definitions of animal, plant, and something in between. Foraminifera, single-celled organisms with intricate shells of calcium carbonate, live in the sand between reefs. Despite being unicellular, some species can grow to several centimeters across. When they die, their shells accumulate to form a significant portion of reef sediment. Over geological time, compressed and cemented forum shells have formed some of Earth's limestone deposits, including the ancient stones used to build the pyramids. Let yourself contemplate these transformations now, from living creature to shell, from shell to sand, from sand to stone, the patient work of time and tide, as one generation builds upon another, as the reef grows ever upward toward the light. Drift with us now into the realm of the giants, the larger creatures whose movements shape the reef in profound ways. We've spoken of whale sharks, those gentle filter feeders that are the largest fish in the sea, but the Great Barrier Reef hosts other impressive visitors as well. Manta rays, with their graceful underwater flight, migrate through these waters seasonally, often gathering at cleaning stations where they hover while smaller fish remove parasites from their skin. A manta can live for up to 50 years, and scientists have discovered that each individual has a unique pattern of spots on its underside, like a fingerprint, allowing researchers to identify and track specific rays over time. Then there are the groupers, some species growing to truly massive sizes. The Queensland grouper, also called the giant grouper, can reach lengths of 2.7 meters and weigh up to 400 kilograms. These fish can live for several decades, growing slowly into the submarine boulders they become. Large groupers are typically solitary and territorial, claiming a particular coral formation or cave as their home and returning to it reliably. Despite their size and powerful jaws, they're curious fish, sometimes approaching divers with what seems like interest, their enormous mouths opening and closing as they breathe. The reef supports a remarkable variety of crustaceans, over 1,300 species of them. Beyond the shrimps we've mentioned, there are lobsters in the deeper waters, walking slowly across the bottom on spindly legs. Hermit crabs parade about in borrowed shells, switching to larger accommodations as they grow. Decorator crabs attach bits of sponge, algae, and other organisms to their shells, creating living camouflage that makes them nearly invisible. Some crabs have developed relationships with corals, living within the branches and defending their coral homes from predators like crown-of-thorns starfish. The water temperature that sustains the reef, that comfortable 24 to 29 degrees Celsius, represents one of the narrowest tolerance ranges of any major ecosystem. Coral reefs exist in a kind of Goldilocks zone where conditions must be just right. Water that's too cold prevents coral growth entirely. Water that's too warm for too long causes corals to expel their symbiotic algae in a stress response called coral bleaching. Without their colorful algae, the corals appear ghostly white, the white limestone skeleton showing through transparent tissue. If conditions return to normal quickly enough, the algae can recolonize and the coral recovers. But extended periods of elevated temperature can kill coral colonies that have grown for centuries. Among the reef's residents are creatures that seem to exist outside of time, the chambered nautilus, for instance, a living fossil virtually unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Unlike their relatives the squid and octopus, nautiluses retain their external shells, beautiful spirals divided into chambers. As the nautilus grows, it adds new, larger chambers to its shell, sealing off the old ones behind it and filling them with gas to control its buoyancy. These ancient mariners rise from deep water at night to hunt, then descend again before dawn, a daily migration they've performed since before the dinosaurs walked the earth. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority employs a zoning system with 7 different zone types, each indicated by a different color on maps. Some zones permit fishing and boating with few restrictions. Others are no-take zones where removing anything is prohibited, allowing those areas to serve as breeding sanctuaries where fish populations can grow large and abundant before their offspring drift to other areas. Scientific studies have shown that fish in these protected zones grow larger, live longer, and produce exponentially more offspring than fish in fished areas. A single large female fish can produce many times more eggs than several smaller females combined. The islands themselves tell geological stories. Some are continental islands, remnants of the mainland that were isolated when sea levels rose after the last ice age. These islands have their own freshwater sources, native vegetation that predates their isolation, and sometimes even their own unique species, lizards or insects found nowhere else on Earth, evolved in isolation over thousands of years. Other islands are true coral cays, built entirely from coral fragments and shells broken and deposited by waves. These cays can shift and change shape with major storms, and new ones occasionally form while others wash away, impermanent landforms in an ever-changing seascape. Reproduction strategies on the reef are remarkably diverse. Some fish, like the seahorses and pipefish found among seagrass and coral, have role-reversed reproduction where males carry the developing young in special pouches. Female seahorses deposit their eggs into the male's pouch during an elaborate courtship dance, and he fertilizes them internally and carries them until they hatch. When the young are ready, the male goes into labor, contracting his pouch to expel dozens or even hundreds of tiny, fully formed baby seahorses into the water. There are also the remarkable leafy sea dragons, relatives of seahorses found in the southern portions of the reef. These creatures look more like floating seaweed than animals, with elaborate leaf-like appendages covering their bodies. They drift through kelp and seagrass, nearly invisible, feeding on tiny mysid shrimp. Like seahorses, male sea dragons carry the eggs, but attached to the underside of their tails rather than in a pouch. The males can carry up to 250 eggs at once, protecting them until they hatch after about 8 weeks. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms, occurs throughout the reef, though it's most visible at night or in deeper water. Some fish have light-producing organs beneath their eyes, which they use to illuminate prey or communicate with potential mates. Certain species of ostracods, tiny crustaceans, produce blue glowing clouds when disturbed, perhaps to startle predators. Even some corals and jellyfish can fluoresce under ultraviolet light, glowing in vibrant pinks, greens, and oranges, a discovery that has led to breakthroughs in biological research, as scientists use these fluorescent proteins as markers in medical studies. Picture the reef at night now, dotted with tiny points of light, the flash of bioluminescent plankton, the glow of a hunting flashlight fish, the steady luminescence of bacteria colonies, each light a signal, a beacon, a small flame of life in the velvet darkness of the tropical sea. Let us descend now into the quieter rhythms of the reef, where patience and persistence define survival. Consider the sponges we mentioned earlier, those ancient filter feeders that seem so simple, yet have thrived for over 600 million years. Some sponge species on the Great Barrier Reef can live for hundreds, possibly thousands of years, growing imperceptibly slowly, filtering water day after day, generation after generation of fish coming and going while the sponge endures. They have no nervous system, no digestive system, no circulatory system, just chambers lined with flagellated cells that create currents, drawing water in through thousands of tiny pores and expelling it through larger openings. The relationship between the reef and the land extends far beyond the obvious. Rivers flowing from the mainland carry not just sediment but also the larvae of some reef species that spend part of their life cycle in freshwater or estuarine environments. Certain prawns, for example, spawn on the reef, but their larvae drift with currents into river mouths and estuaries where they mature before migrating back to the ocean as adults. This connection between freshwater and marine environments means that the health of the reef depends partly on the health of distant river systems and catchments. Everything is connected, even across the boundary between salt water and fresh. Among the reef's most ingenious hunters are the mantis shrimp, not true shrimp at all, but stomatopods, a distinct order of crustaceans. These creatures possess the most complex eyes in the animal kingdom, with 16 types of color receptors compared to our mere 3. They can see ultraviolet and polarized light, perceiving a world of color we cannot begin to imagine. Mantis shrimp come in two main types: spearers, which have pointed appendages for impaling soft-bodied prey, and smashers, which have club-like appendages they use to strike with incredible force. A smasher's punch accelerates faster than a bullet from a gun, creating cavitation bubbles that collapse with a flash of light and enough force to crack aquarium glass. They can break apart crab shells, snail shells, and even the hard casings of other mantis shrimp with these devastating strikes. The Great Barrier Reef plays a crucial role in the carbon cycle, helping to regulate atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. The coral polyps and their symbiotic algae, the seagrasses, the phytoplankton, and countless other organisms take carbon dioxide from the water and incorporate it into their tissues and shells. When these organisms die, some of this carbon is buried in sediment, effectively removing it from the carbon cycle for geological timescales. Coral reefs worldwide store significant amounts of carbon, though they're also affected by increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, which makes ocean water more acidic and can interfere with corals' ability to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. Swimming through the reef's waters are creatures called salps that we touched on earlier, but their role deserves deeper consideration. These gelatinous tunicates can form blooms of billions of individuals, and they're among the most efficient filter feeders known, capable of clearing the water of phytoplankton at remarkable rates. Their fecal pellets are dense and sink rapidly, creating a pathway for carbon to move from surface waters to the deep ocean. In this way, these fragile, transparent creatures that seem almost insubstantial play an outsized role in global nutrient cycles. The reef is home to an astonishing diversity of worms beyond the polychaetes we've mentioned. Flatworms glide across corals and rocks on carpets of tiny cilia, their bodies often brilliantly colored and patterned. Some flatworms have evolved to look almost identical to nudibranch, possibly mimicking species that are toxic to predators. These flatworms are simultaneous hermaphrodites, each individual has both male and female organs, and when two meet to mate, they engage in a bizarre behavior where each tries to inject sperm into the other while avoiding being inseminated, as producing eggs requires more energy than producing sperm. Among the larger fish on the reef are the barracuda, sleek predators that can grow to nearly 2 meters in length. They often hunt in the early morning or late evening, using their excellent eyesight to spot prey from a distance. Despite their fearsome appearance and sharp teeth, barracuda are generally wary of humans. They sometimes follow divers out of curiosity, attracted by anything shiny or reflective, which they might mistake for the flash of fish scales. Young barracuda often school together in massive aggregations for protection, creating silver walls of fish that swirl and shift with hypnotic synchrony. The cuttlefish that frequent the reef possess intelligence that continues to surprise researchers. They can learn by watching other cuttlefish, a form of social learning rare in invertebrates. Male cuttlefish have been observed using deception, changing their appearance to look like females when sneaking past larger, dominant males to mate with guarded females. They can split their body display, showing aggressive coloration on the side facing a rival while displaying courtship colors on the side facing a female. This requires extraordinary control over millions of pigment cells in their skin, all coordinated by a brain smaller than a walnut. There are also the bizarre fishes that seem designed by imagination rather than evolution. Frogfish, which we mentioned earlier, come in varieties that look like sponges, corals, or even algae-covered rocks. The hairy frogfish is covered in filaments that help it blend with algae and hydroids. Some species can change color over several days to match new surroundings. Then there are the ghost pipefish, relatives of seahorses that float head down among coral branches and feather stars, their elongated bodies and elaborate fins making them nearly invisible. Razorfish swim vertically, their compressed bodies and sharp heads allowing them to hide among sea urchin spines or soft coral branches. The cycle of life and death on the reef happens constantly, at every scale. A coral polyp catches a copepod. A parrotfish bites coral and excretes sand. A sea cucumber processes sediment. A shark's tooth falls out and is replaced. This constant cycling of nutrients, this endless transformation of matter from one form to another, has continued for millennia and will continue for millennia more, each ending becoming a beginning, each loss creating space for new life. Rest in this thought now, the eternal cycle, the patient transformation, the way nothing is ever truly lost but only changed, redistributed, reborn in new forms under the endless sun. As we near the end of our journey tonight, let us consider the reef as a whole, not just a collection of individual species, but as a single, vast, interconnected organism, breathing with the tides, pulsing with life, responding to the seasons and the moon and the sun in ways both obvious and subtle. The Great Barrier Reef generates its own weather patterns in the water itself. During the day, the shallow lagoons warm faster than deeper water, creating convection currents that mix nutrients vertically. At night, the pattern reverses as surface water cools. These daily temperature cycles create invisible rivers within the reef, carrying plankton, nutrients, and larvae in complex three-dimensional patterns. Fish have learned these patterns, positioning themselves in currents that bring food to them, conserving energy by letting the water do the work. Among the reef's most remarkable seasonal visitors are the dwarf minke whales, a smaller relative of the common minke whale. These whales, reaching about 8 meters in length, visit the northern Great Barrier Reef between June and August. Unlike most baleen whales, dwarf minke whales often approach boats and swimmers with apparent curiosity, circling and observing, sometimes for hours. Scientists still don't fully understand what draws them to the reef or why they display such unusually inquisitive behavior. They remain one of the reef's beautiful mysteries, creatures we share space with but don't yet truly comprehend. The reef supports not just the species we can see, but countless microscopic organisms that form the foundation of the entire ecosystem. Bacteria in the water and within the reef structure break down organic matter, recycling nutrients. Archaea, single-celled organisms distinct from bacteria, live in the sediments, some of them processing nitrogen in ways that make it available to other life forms. Viruses, though not technically alive, exist in concentrations of millions per milliliter of seawater, infecting bacteria and algae, regulating their populations and releasing nutrients when their hosts die and break apart. This microbial world is as diverse and complex as the visible one, yet it remains largely invisible to us as we swim above. Near the reef edge where waves break, there's the constant rush and roar of water over coral. In sheltered lagoons, the soundscape is dominated by biological noises, the snap of shrimp, the crunch of parrotfish, the grunts of various fish species. Scientists have discovered that these soundscapes are important orientation cues for fish larvae settling from the plankton. A reef that has been damaged and has lost much of its animal life becomes eerily quiet, and larvae seeking a place to settle may avoid these silent areas, swimming instead toward the healthy cacophony of a thriving reef community. Reef fish display remarkable abilities to remember and navigate their territories. Studies have shown that some species can remember the locations of hundreds of individual feeding sites and plan efficient routes between them, demonstrating spatial memory comparable to that of mammals and birds. They recognize neighbors and remember the outcomes of past interactions, adjusting their behavior accordingly. The assumption that fish have 3-second memories is not just wrong, it's profoundly wrong. Many reef fish are as cognitively sophisticated as the terrestrial animals we more readily credit with intelligence. The Great Barrier Reef extends across approximately 14 degrees of latitude, from roughly 10 degrees south to 24 degrees south. This latitudinal range means the northern reefs experience consistently tropical conditions, while the southern reefs sit at the very edge of where corals can survive, occasionally experiencing water temperatures that drop below the ideal range. This creates a diversity of conditions within the reef system itself, with different species dominating in different regions. The southern reefs host some species of temperate water fish not found in the warmer north, while the northern reefs support coral species that can't survive the cooler southern winters. Among the most ancient fish on the reef are the sharks, cartilaginous fish whose lineage extends back over 400 million years. But even more ancient are the coelacanth, though these deep-water fish are rarely seen near the reef itself. The reef does host other living fossils, creatures whose body plans have remained largely unchanged for extraordinary spans of time. The horseshoe crab, though not actually a crab but more closely related to spiders, has existed virtually unchanged for 450 million years. Port Jackson sharks, with their distinctive blunt heads and dorsal spines, represent a body plan at least 150 million years old. These creatures are windows into deep time, swimming proof that some designs need no improvement. The coral spawning event we described earlier, that magical night when billions of eggs and sperm cloud the water, is precisely timed for good reason. The larvae need specific conditions to survive. Released after a full moon when tides are moderate, the eggs float at the surface for several days before developing into larvae that must find suitable substrate to settle on. The synchronization ensures that predators are overwhelmed, no matter how many fish and filter feeders gorge themselves on coral spawn, enough survives to ensure the next generation. It's a strategy of abundance, of overwhelming odds through sheer numbers. As we reach the end of our journey through the Great Barrier Reef tonight, let yourself float in the warm, clear water one last time. Picture the morning sun slanting down through the surface, illuminating particles suspended in the water column, each tiny speck a universe of plankton, bacteria, or organic matter on its way to becoming something else. See the coral polyps contracted in their daytime rest, their zooxanthellae busy converting sunlight into energy. Watch a turtle glide past, ancient and unhurried, paddling toward a patch of seagrass. Notice a school of silver fish moving as one organism, turning together in perfect synchrony, catching the light. The Great Barrier Reef has existed in various forms for millions of years, and with care, it will continue its patient growth, its daily rhythms, its seasonal transformations, long after we're gone. It is both fragile and resilient, constantly dying and being reborn, each polyp building on the skeleton of its ancestors, reaching always toward the light. Let sleep take you now, as gentle as a current, as peaceful as the lagoon at dawn, carrying you safely through the night. Just as the reef cradles millions of creatures in its protective embrace, just as it has done for thousands of years, just as the tide returns, faithful and sure, bringing with it tomorrow.